The antique shop, nestled in a forgotten alley of the old city, smelled of dust, aged paper, and something faintly metallic, like rusted iron. A single, flickering bulb cast long, dancing shadows across the cluttered shelves, illuminating a collection of forgotten treasures and discarded memories. Amongst a tarnished silver and chipped porcelain, a doll sat upright, its porcelain face eerily serene, its eyes, two polished obsidian beads, seeming to follow every movement. Elara, a young woman with a penchant for the peculiar, was drawn to the doll like a moth to a flame. Its Victorian dress, though faded and torn, held a strange elegance, and the delicate lace around its wrists hinted at a forgotten beauty. She felt an inexplicable pull, a sense of familiarity that sent a shiver down her spine. "That one's not for sale," a raspy voice echoed from the shadows. The shopkeeper, a gaunt man with eyes like chips of flint, emerged from behind a towering stack of dusty books. His gaze was fixed on the doll, a flicker of something akin to fear in his eyes. "Why not?" Elara asked, her voice betraying her curiosity. "It's troublesome," the shopkeeper mumbled, his gaze darting around the shop as if expecting something to materialize from the shadows. "It brings unpleasantness." Elara, dismissing his superstition as the ramblings of an old man, insisted. After much haggling and the shopkeeper's increasingly agitated warnings, she finally persuaded him to sell the doll, paying a hefty sum for the unsettling object. Back in her apartment, a converted attic space with sloping ceilings and a panoramic view of the city's rooftops, Elara placed the doll on her antique writing desk. She named it Seraphina, a name that felt oddly fitting. The doll's presence filled the room with an unsettling stillness, a silence that seemed to hum with an unseen energy. That night, Elara had a nightmare. She dreamt of a young girl, her face obscured by shadows, crying out in a voice that was both pleading and accusing. The girl was trapped in a dark, suffocating space, her hands reaching out in desperation. Elara woke with a gasp, her heart pounding. The image of the girl burned into her mind. The next day, strange things began to happen. Small objects would disappear and reappear in different locations. A cold draft would sweep through the room, even with the windows tightly shut. Elara, initially attributing these occurrences to her overactive imagination, began to feel a growing unease. One evening, while working on a research paper, Elara heard a faint scratching sound coming from the direction of the doll. She turned to see Seraphina's head slowly turning, her obsidian eyes fixed on Elara. A cold wave of fear washed over her. She tried to convince herself it was a trick of the light, a figment of her imagination, but the image of the doll's head turning remained etched in her mind. The scratching continued, growing louder, more insistent. Elara, her hands trembling, reached for the doll. As her fingers brushed against the porcelain cheek, she felt a jolt of electricity, a surge of cold energy that made her recoil. She decided to research the doll's history, hoping to find some explanation for the strange occurrences. She returned to the antique shop, but the shopkeeper was nowhere to be found. The shop was in disarray, as if a struggle had taken place. A sense of dread settled over her. Elara began to delve into the city's archives, searching for any mention of a doll matching Seraphina's description. She discovered a series of unsolved disappearances from the late 19th century, all involving young girls from wealthy families. One name, Seraphina Beaumont, stood out. Seraphina Beaumont was the daughter of a prominent industrialist, known for his cruelty and ruthless business practices. She vanished without a trace, her disappearance shrouded in mystery. Rumors circulated that she had been kidnapped, murdered, or even driven to madness by her abusive father. Elara found a faded photograph of Seraphina, a young girl with hauntingly familiar obsidian eyes. The resemblance to the doll was uncanny. She felt a chill run down her spine. The doll was Seraphina. The strange occurrences in her apartment intensified. The scratching turned into whispers, faint voices that seemed to emanate from the doll itself. Elara would find herself waking in the middle of the night, feeling a cold presence watching her from the shadows. One night, she found a small, tarnished silver locket lying on her desk, beside the doll. It was engraved with the initials SB. Inside, she found a miniature portrait of Seraphina, her face filled with a deep sadness. Elara felt a wave of empathy for the tormented spirit trapped within the doll. She realized that Seraphina was not malevolent, but desperate, seeking justice for the wrongs committed against her. She decided to investigate Seraphina's disappearance, hoping to uncover the truth and bring peace to her restless spirit. She delved into old newspaper articles, court records, and family histories, piecing together the fragmented story of Seraphina's life. She discovered that Seraphina's father, Edward Beaumont, was a cruel and domineering man, obsessed with control. He had forced Serafina into an arranged marriage with a wealthy but abusive man. Serafina, desperate to escape her fate, had confided in a young servant girl, her only friend. One night, Serafina and the servant girl attempted to flee, but Edward Beaumont discovered their plan. In a fit of rage, he locked Serafina in the basement of his mansion, a dark, suffocating space where he kept his most prized possessions. The servant girl, fearing for her life, fled the city, never to return. Serafina, trapped in the darkness, slowly succumbed to despair. Her spirit, consumed by anger and grief, became bound to the doll, a gift from her father, a symbol of his control. Elara realized that the doll was not cursed, but a vessel, a prison for Serafina's tormented soul. She understood that the strange occurrences were not acts of malice, but desperate pleas for help. She decided to confront Edward Beaumont's descendants, hoping to find some way to release Serafina's spirit. She tracked down the last surviving member of the Beaumont family, a reclusive old woman named Agatha, living in a crumbling mansion on the outskirts of the city. Agatha, initially reluctant to speak, eventually revealed the truth about Serafina's fate. She confirmed that Edward Beaumont had locked Serafina in the basement, where she died of starvation and despair. He had then buried her body in a secret chamber beneath the mansion. Elara, armed with this knowledge, returned to her apartment, determined to free Serafina's spirit. She placed the doll on her desk, lit a candle, and spoke to Serafina's spirit, promising to bring her justice. She returned to the old Beaumont mansion with Agatha and found the hidden chamber in the basement. It was a cold, damp space, filled with the remnants of Serafina's life. A small, wooden chest lay in the corner, containing Serafina's skeletal remains. Elara, with Agatha's help, performed a ritual, reciting ancient prayers and burning incense. As the smoke filled the chamber, a faint, ethereal glow emanated from the doll. Serafina's spirit, finally released from its prison, appeared before them, a translucent figure filled with a profound sadness. Elara spoke to Serafina, telling her that her story had been heard, that her suffering was acknowledged. Serafina's spirit, her face filled with a serene peace, smiled at Elara, then faded away, leaving behind a lingering sense of tranquility. The doll, now empty, lay on the floor, its porcelain face devoid of its haunting gaze. Elara picked it up, feeling a sense of closure. She returned the doll to the antique shop, placing it back on the shelf where she had found it. The shopkeeper, his eyes filled with gratitude, thanked her. He told her that the doll had finally found its peace, and that the curse had been lifted. Elara left the shop, feeling a sense of relief and a deep respect for the power of the past. She knew that Serafina's story would forever be etched in her memory, a reminder of the enduring power of the human spirit, even in the face of unimaginable cruelty. The silence in her apartment was now a peaceful one, and the feeling of being watched had finally left.